Gila. Enhancing Careers. Chapter 6. Classification of Wines. A description of different types of wine begins with classification. The classification of wine can be done according to various methods including place of origin or appellation, vinification and style, sweetness and vintage, or varietal used. Wines of all types can be classified by either the primary grape variety or the region where the grapes were grown. Wines classified by the type of grape they contain are called varietals, and wines classified by the growing region are named for the region itself. Even within types of wine, there is a great variety of flavor and texture due to the climate of growing regions. A warm, wet year will produce grapes with a different flavor than a cooler, drier growing season. This is why some labels and years are more valuable than others. Some classifications enjoy official protection by being part of the wine law in their country of origin, while other has been created by growers' organizations without such protection. Historically, wines have been known by names reflecting their origin, and sometimes style. Bordeaux, Rioja, Mosel, and Chianti are all legally defined names reflecting the traditional wines produced in the named region. These naming conventions or appellations dictate not only where the grapes in a wine were grown, but also which grapes went into the wine and how they were vinified. The appellation system is strongest in the European Union, but a related system, the American viticultural area, restricts the use of certain regional labels in America, such as Napa Valley, Santa Barbara, and Willamette Valley. The wines are classified on following basis. By color, table wines, red, white, rose. By nature, still/table, sparkling, fortified, aromatized. By taste, sweet, dry. By age, vintage, non-vintage. By body, light, medium, heavy-bodied wine. The image shows the classification of wines based on their characteristics or nature. The image shows the different types of wines. Classification by color. Tables wines are natural wines and are the result of fermentation of grape juice with little or no addition of other substances and made without any diversions from natural processes. Table wines are about half the strength alcoholically of fortified wines with their alcoholic strength of 8% to 14%. It may be red, white, or pink according to whether the juice was separated from skin before or after it was allowed to ferment, and also according to color of the grapes used. White wine is made from white/green grapes, whereas rose wine or blush wine is made from red grapes, but are only allowed to stay in contact with the grape skins for a short time. This allows it to keep only some of the reddish color. Red wine is always made from red grapes. The skins are retained in the must during all or part of fermentation to extract the pigment from grapes, giving the wine red color. Table wines are served with meals. Red wines are served chilled and are usually opened an hour before serving to enhance the aroma. White and rose wines are always served chilled. White wines are usually served with white meats and fish, while red wines with red meats. Table wines may have an alcohol content that not higher than 14% in the U.S. and for light wine, it must be within 8.5% and 14% alcohol by volume in Europe. Classification by nature. On the basis of nature of wines are of four types viz. Sparkling wines, aromatized wine, fortified wine or house wine. Sparkling wine. Sparkling wines contain carbon dioxide which is produced naturally from fermentation or force-injected later. To have this effect, the wine is fermented twice, once in an open container to allow the carbon dioxide to escape into the air, and a second time in a sealed container, where the gas is caught and remains in the wine. Sparkling wines that gain their carbonation from the traditional method of bottle fermentation are labeled bottle fermented. The best-known sparkling wine is champagne, which is produced by a complicated process. It is a blended wine with a blend of the product of many vintages of both red and white grapes, predominantly red. The chief grapes variety used for production of champagne is black and gray. The Chardonnay predominates in the region of white grapes, and Chardonnay is the only white grapes from which champagne is made. The process of making sparkling wine can take months, even years. Sparkling wine is popular worldwide and is produced in all of the major winemaking regions. Semi-sparkling wines are sparkling wines that contain less than 2.5 atmospheres of carbon dioxide at sea level and 20 degrees Celsius. Sparkling wine has 12% alcohol content. Sparkling wines are served during special occasions. They are served chilled at any time and with any food. Aromatized wine. Aromatized wine is a fortified wine in which herbs, roots, flowers, barks, and other flavoring agents have been steeped in order to change the natural flavors of the wine. Aromatized wines includes both dry and sweet vermouths and the quinine wines of the various countries. Vermouth is the name given to those flavored wines which in theory contained wormwood. Aromatic wines are fortified wines made from a blend of several wines. The natural flavor of the wine is changed by adding spices, herbs, and other ingredients. Alcohol content of aromatic wines is 15 to 20%. Ice wine is made from grapes that are harvested while they are frozen. Fortified wines are often sweeter, and generally more alcoholic wines that have had their fermentation process stopped by the addition of a spirit, such as brandy, or have had additional spirit added after fermentation. Examples include port, Madeira, and sherry. Fortified wines. These are the wines which are fortified with spirit like brandy during vinification, when fermentation process is going on. If fortification is done in the beginning of fermentation, the end product is sweet fortified wine. If fortification is towards the end of fermentation, the resultant wine is dry fortified wine. Fortified wines have an alcoholic strength of 15% to 24% and also good keeping quality. Fortified wines may be sweet or dry, white, rose, or red. Fortified wines are also called dessert wines or liqueur wines. Fortified wines like port and sherry contains added alcohol. The alcohol is usually supplied by adding brandy distilled from wines of the same region as that of the wine being fortified. Fortified wines are served at cool room temperature with cheese, fruit, or pastry after retiring from the dinner table. Dessert wines range from slightly sweet to incredibly sweet wines. House wines. Any wine which is not too expensive or too cheap and can be used by any restaurant. No particular brand is branded as house wine. Classification by taste. On the basis of taste, wines may be classified in two categories: sweet wines and dry wines. Sweet wine produced by grapes having high sugar content. As in these wines, even after fermentation, a lot of sugar is still left, which is not consumed by yeast. The sugar left renders a very sweet wine. Dry wines produced by grapes with less sugar content, and the fermentation is allowed to continue till all the sugar is almost or fully consumed. Classification by aging. This classification gives two types of wines, viz. Vintage and non-vintage. The French word vintage means harvest, although any wine is a vintage wine as any year can be vintage year. However, some years' climate is so good that the government in France declares it as vintage year for particular region. The various climatic factors for the year to be declared vintage years are sunshine, temperature, right amount of snow, etc., sugar balance in grapes, and its concentration. On the labels of some bottles, vintage year printed, while on some not. When the vintage year is printed on the bottle, it means the wine is from that particular year harvest when the crop was bumper. The bottles not having vintage year printed on them are generally blended to make wine good. Every year, two types of wines are produced, one special vintage and other non-vintage. The vintage wines are bottled and sold while non-vintage are kept and improved. Vintage port is wine of 1 year only, bottled after 2 years, but not ready for drinking until at least 10 years. Vintage port needs to be carefully decanted to separate the wine from its sediments. Late bottled vintage port is the wine of 1 year, but bottled after about 5 years and ready for drinking immediately. Classification by the body. On the basis of body, wines are classified as light-bodied wine, medium-bodied wine, or full-bodied wine. The term light refers to alcoholic content, texture, and weight of wine. Light also refers to sensation in mouth. These are not matured in casks, rather left in stainless steel or glass vats before bottling. The alcoholic is less than 12%. Medium-bodied wines are wines which are round, fairly fat with good body, texture, flavor, for example Rioja, Hermitage, etc. Full-bodied wines have heavy body, texture, and higher alcoholic content, rich taste with forceful flavor. There are several wines which are not in above all categories are termed as unspecified wines can be varietal wines, generic wines, green wines, and organic wines. Varietal wines are the wines of North America, which are labeled after the main grapes variety in the bottle. The top-quality varietal wines of California are known as premium wines, which can be compared with French AOC wines, 75% grape variety named on the label. Generic wines are those wines which are named after the long-established European areas. Green wines are Portuguese wines come from vine grown on the granitic soil in the province of Miho. These are acid wines of low alcoholic content, white, rose, and red. Appetizer wines or apéritif wines are served chilled before a meal to sharpen the appetite. They are usually dry or semi-sweet fortified or aromatic wines. In most of the world, wine-labeled champagne must be made from grapes grown in the Champagne region of France and fermented using a certain method based on the international trademark agreements included in the 1919 Treaty of Versailles. Many regional wine classifications exist as part of tradition or appellation law. The most common of these is based on vineyard sites and include the Bordeaux Wine Official Classification of 1855, though some regions classify their wines based on the style like the German wine classification system.